The galaxy had long forgotten Earth, and the stories of its strength. The great empires of the stars mocked the planet as nothing but dust and ruin. And yet, hidden in the whispers of time, there was a tale that would not die, a tale of an ancient protector that once stood watch over humanity. Some said it was a machine larger than cities, forged before the dark age of silence. Others claimed it was something living, a being of light and shadow, bound to Earth itself. And while the galaxy laughed and called these myths, the people of Earth remembered, for deep beneath their broken soil, the truth had only slept, waiting for the hour when it would rise again. And that hour was near. It began with strange signals, faint ripples across forgotten. Sectors of space traders spoke of their instruments flickering when they passed near the ruins of Earth's moon. Others swore they felt the weight of something watching them in the void, and when scouts from alien fleets went to investigate, they found nothing but broken stone and dust. Still they returned, uneasy, whispering of a silence too heavy, a silence that pressed upon the soul like a storm that had not yet begun. And though their leaders mocked their fear, the scouts swore that something ancient was stirring, something powerful enough to cast a shadow over the stars themselves. On Earth, the people were quiet, but in their silence there was no despair. There was waiting, for they knew their guardian was not gone, only sleeping. They had kept the memory alive through centuries of darkness, when alien boots crushed their colonies, when the galaxy laughed at their weakness. They remembered the promise that when Earth was on the edge of being lost, the protector would rise and bring fear to those who had once brought fear to them. And now, as the sky trembled with strange auroras and the ground shook with faint thunder, humanity looked upward with eyes of fire, for they knew the prophecy was awakening before them. Beneath the shattered crust of the moon, vast caverns opened as ancient machinery ground to life, engines older than empires burning again with blue fire. Vast limbs of steel moved through the dust as a figure of impossible size began to rise, and its eyes, once dark, now burned with a glow, like newborn suns. It stood half-buried still. Yet already it cast a shadow across the planet, and the shadow stretched farther and farther until it reached the void itself, and in the stations and ships watching from afar terror spread. For this was no myth, this was real, and its awakening could not be stopped. The alien councils laughed when the first rumors arrived. They called them lies spread by frightened traders. They called them tricks to stir fear and rebellion among the outer colonies. But even as they spoke, more signals came, more fleets vanished near the Earth sector, and more witnesses whispered of a giant rising from shadow. One alien captain who barely escaped swore with trembling voice that he saw a being whose size dwarfed his warship, whose eyes glowed brighter than stars, and when it turned its gaze upon him, his soul shook as if the void itself was alive, and in that moment he fled, never looking back. But his words spread across the stars like fire, and no laughter could extinguish it. Now the galaxy trembled between disbelief and fear. For if the protector was real, then everything they thought about Earth was wrong. If the protector had risen, then the galaxy was no longer safe from the race they had counted out and dismissed as broken. Humanity, once forgotten, was now watched over by a power beyond imagination, and in the silence of their homes across countless worlds, alien citizens whispered what their leaders refused to speak aloud. If the protector truly walked again, then the stars themselves would tremble in its shadow, and the age of human weakness was already ending. The silence after the awakening did not last long, for when the first fragments of the protector were seen rising from beneath the broken moon, the galaxy's fragile calm began to fracture. Alien empires that had mocked Earth for centuries suddenly found their councils filled with panic and confusion. Traders who once crossed the forgotten routes near Sol now abandoned them, fearing the shadow that stretched further each passing day, And still the signals came faint ripples in the void that shook instruments and made even veteran captains glance nervously at their screens, as if the stars themselves whispered a warning that none wished to hear. And yet humanity remained quiet, watching, waiting, knowing what the galaxy had not yet understood, that the ancient protector was not merely a legend, but a force beyond the reach of armies and fleets. The first true sign came with the disappearance of an entire alien patrol squadron near Earth's orbit. It had been a small force sent only to investigate reports of energy flares, their commanders laughing at the thought that Earth could be dangerous again. But when their transmissions cut off, when their beacons went dark, and when their last desperate message was nothing but static, every empire watching the reports knew the silence was not natural. The squadron had not fled. It had not broken apart in mutiny. It had been erased, and soon whispers spread of flashes seen in the dark of burning wrecks drifting near the forgotten world, and of a colossal shadow moving slowly, as though testing its strength before rising. In full panic, began to seep into the great halls of alien power, yet pride kept their leaders from speaking truth. They claimed the missing fleets had been destroyed by pirates. They claimed the signals were nothing but unstable anomalies in the void. But the soldiers who had fought at the edges of the storm knew better. They had seen the light in the dark, the flare of something vast and ancient, tearing through ships as though they were no more than paper, and the terror in their eyes spoke louder than any denial, and while the rulers debated, the people whispered in fear, asking the question that none could escape: if Earth's protector had truly awakened, then what power in the galaxy could ever stand against it? On Earth, the awakening was felt in every soul, for the skies shone with strange aurora's colors that danced where no storms should exist, and the ground trembled with a rhythm like the heartbeat of something buried deep within the planet itself. Children looked to the stars with awe, while the old spoke in hushed tones of the prophecy, remembered in fragments, passed through generations, the prophecy that promised Earth would not remain silent forever, that when the time of shadow came, the protector would rise, not only to defend, but to bring fear upon those who had once mocked the human name, and in the hearts of humanity there grew not only hope, but also a burning fire, a hunger to see justice finally cast upon the stars. The alien fleets that remained. Near Sol tried to regroup, but when they drew near the broken moon, they saw it fully for the first time, vast and towering, a figure of steel and light, its form carved with lines that glowed like rivers of fire, its eyes shining like twin stars burning. Through the void it moved with a slowness that carried weight, with a silence that screamed louder than thunder, and though it raised no weapon, though it made no strike, the very sight of it was enough to drive terror into the crews, for they knew, instinctively, this was not a machine they could understand. It was not a weapon they could match. It was something older, something greater, something that had waited for this moment. The news of its full appearance could not be hidden. This time, images leaked across every network showing the shadow of the protector against the stars. Entire planets fell into panic markets, crashed. Governments issued desperate speeches insisting the threat was under control, but even as they spoke, their voices shook, for they knew the truth, and the truth was merciless. The protector had returned, and the galaxy was unprepared to face it, and for the first time in centuries, the name of Earth was spoken, not as a joke, not as a relic, not as dust, but as a rising shadow, one that would soon stretch across every empire, and with each passing hour the fear grew. For no one knew what the protector would do next, only that when it moved again, the stars themselves would tremble. The galaxy had seen many wars, but never before had it faced a silence so heavy as the one brought by the awakening of Earth's ancient protector, for across the stars, governments clung to fragile words claiming there was no danger, while their secret councils shook in fear, for the images of the colossal being were undeniable. now a giant of steel and shadow rising from the ruins of the moon, its glowing eyes watching the void as if judging the empires that once laughed at Earth. Its form, so vast that even the largest alien dreadnoughts seemed like insects beside it. And yet what terrified them most was not its size, but its silence, for it made no demands, and it struck no words, only waited as though deciding when to move. And this, waiting, was far worse than an open war. Alien fleets gathered in panic, each empire desperate to prove they were not afraid. Yet beneath their proud speeches, they argued in whispers, none wishing to be the first to strike for the memory of those who had already vanished near Earth, lingered like a wound. Entire patrols erased without a trace, their wreckage swallowed by the void. The soldiers who survived spoke of a single glance of burning eyes that broke their courage and forced them to flee. And still, the Protector remained unmoving, its gaze fixed upon the stars as if it already knew what would come next. And the galaxy trembled, because no one knew whose empire would feel its shadow first on Earth. The people watched the skies with a mixture of awe and fire. For centuries they had been forgotten, mocked and beaten by powers who saw them as weak. But now their ancient guardian had risen and the world shook with hope. Every whisper of doubt burned away children who once grew. Up beneath alien oppression now dreamed of freedom. Elders who had kept the prophecy alive wept openly, knowing their patience had not been in vain, and leaders who had long bowed to the galaxy now stood taller, for they knew Earth was no longer defenseless. It was no longer alone. It had something the stars could not defeat. And though the Protector had yet to speak, humanity already felt the promise of its rising like a storm waiting to break. The first test came when a coalition fleet of alien warships entered the Sol system, their commanders desperate to prove to their people that the Protector was nothing but a hollow myth. They came armed with dreadnoughts, cruisers, and swarms of fighters, a force large enough to crush 100 worlds yet. When they approached the broken moon, their power seemed to shrink before the shadow that waited there. The Protector did not move at first, its vast form standing silent against the glow of the Earth. But when the fleet unleashed its weapons, when rivers of plasma and storms of missiles filled the void, the silence ended. With a single movement, the Protector raised one arm, a limb carved from steel and light, and in that moment the battlefield was consumed by fire beams of energy, tore through the darkness like blades of the sun cutting through dreadnoughts as if they were nothing more than glass. One by one, ships fell, burning wreckage scattering across the void as the coalition panicked their formation, breaking their commanders, screaming for retreat. But there was no retreat. The Protector's eyes blazed with light brighter than any star, and wherever its gaze turned, fleets crumbled. Their strength meant nothing, their numbers worthless against the storm that had been sleeping, for ages now awakened with fury. The battle did not last long when it ended. The void was filled with wreckage. The once proud fleet shattered into drifting ruins, their signals gone, their voices silenced, and yet the Protector did not pursue. It did not chase those who fled it, only stood in silence once more, its colossal frame towering against the broken moon, its burning eyes watching the fleeing ships, as if reminding them that survival was a gift, not a right. And across the galaxy, when the news spread, empires that had mocked Earth fell into chaos. No one could deny the truth anymore. No one could pretend it was a myth. Earth's Protector was real. It was unstoppable, and it had just destroyed the greatest fleet the galaxy had dared. To send whispers turned into fear, and fear turned into obedience in the farthest colonies where humans still lived in chains. Revolts began to stir, for the people now believed they were not forgotten, that the Protector's shadow would reach them, too. And in the hearts of alien citizens across countless worlds, there was unease, for they too began to whisper the name of humanity not as weakness, but as power. And though their rulers tried to silence them, fear is not so easily crushed the truth. had already spread, the Protector had risen, and its shadow had only just begun to fall across the stars. The galaxy had thought itself untouchable for so long that the destruction of the Coalition fleet near Earth echoed like thunder through every star system. Entire empires that once laughed at humanity now sat in silence, afraid to admit the truth, yet unable to deny it. For the ruins of warships still drifted in the void near Sol, glowing wrecks that told a story clearer than any words. The Protector was real, and it was unstoppable. But still the rulers of the galaxy could not agree. Some cried for immediate war, believing that united, they could overwhelm the ancient being. Others whispered of retreat, of leaving Earth in silence and hoping the shadow would fade, but no one truly believed it would fade, for already the Protector had become more than a weapon. It had become a storm on the horizon, a storm that none could stop, and every passing hour brought the question of who it would strike next on Earth. The people felt the tremors of change spreading through the stars. They watched the reports with fire in their hearts as images of the fallen fleet reached them, and for the first time in centuries, they felt the weight of hope that could not be denied. Children shouted the name of their guardian from broken rooftops. Soldiers sworn to defend a planet long mocked stood taller as if their strength had been restored, and leaders who once begged alien councils for mercy now knew mercy was no longer needed. For Earth was not alone. The Protector's shadow stretched across them, and with it came the strength to stand against the galaxy itself. Yet even in their hope there was unease for the Protector, though. Mighty had not spoken. It had not declared its purpose, and humanity wondered, was it truly their guardian, or was it something more, something beyond their control? The alien empires, meanwhile, grew restless. They had seen the Protector's fury. They had felt its silence. And still they could not agree. The Kalari Dominion cried for vengeance, promising fleets greater than any before to crush Earth. The Veyrak Union urged patience, speaking of diplomacy, though their voices trembled with fear. And the Triarch Confederacy simply watched in silence, their vast eyes fixed upon the shadow rising from the moon. For they remembered something the others had forgotten. Fragments of ancient history, long-buried stories of a being forged not as a weapon of war, but as a sentinel to guard the first human steps into the stars, a sentinel bound to Earth itself, not by chains but by choice. And if that tale was true, then no fleet, no empire, no weapon forged in all the galaxy could unmake it. Whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire across the colonies, where humans had been enslaved for generations. In the mines of distant moons, in the factories of alien worlds, they whispered of the battle they had seen, the Protector rising, the fleets burning. And in those whispers came courage. Uprisings broke out in quiet corners. Small at first, but growing faster than the empires could crush them, for the enslaved no longer believed themselves forgotten. Now they believed the Protector's shadow would reach them, and with that belief came fire that even the greatest armadas struggled to extinguish. The Protector itself remained silent after the battle, drifting near the broken moon, its glowing eyes fixed upon the void, and though it moved rarely, each movement echoed like thunder sensors across the system, recorded energy pulses greater than anything known. Machinery in alien ships trembled when it stirred, as if reality itself bent beneath its weight, and still the question grew heavier. What was it waiting for? Was it gathering its strength? Was it listening? Or was it simply watching to decide who would fall next? No one knew, and the uncertainty gnawed at the empires far more than open war ever could in hidden corners of the galaxy. Secret councils gathered not of rulers but of scholars, for they too remembered fragments of the past, ancient carvings that spoke of a guardian bound to Earth, prophecies etched into stone long before their own empires rose, and in those forgotten words they found something terrifying. It was said that the Protector did not awaken without reason. It did not rise without purpose, and that when it rose, it was not only to shield, but to judge, and if judgment had come, then the galaxy itself might already be condemned. Fear spread faster than fleets, rebellion grew fiercer than chains, and the name of humanity, once spoken with laughter, now carried a weight that bent even the proudest rulers, and still the Protector did not strike again. It simply waited, its burning eyes watching as though measuring the stars themselves, and in that silence the galaxy trembled for all. Now understood the truth. The Protector was awake, and its shadow had only begun to fall. The ruins of the Coalition fleet still drifted near the broken moon like a graveyard of twisted metal, each shattered warship glowing faintly in the darkness, a reminder to the galaxy of the power that had been unleashed. And while the empires struggled to hide their fear, they could not silence the whispers that spread from world to world, for every traitor, every smuggler, every spy carried the same tale. The Protector had risen, and its shadow stretched farther with each passing day. Entire systems paused their wars, paused their rivalries, even paused their trade simply to ask the same question: who would it strike next? And though the rulers made loud speeches of strength, their trembling voices betrayed them, for all knew the truth. No empire, no fleet, no weapon was ready. On Earth, the people lived with fire in their hearts, hope like they had never known in centuries. But along with that hope came unease, for even as they cheered, even as children painted images of the Guardian across city walls, there remained one question unanswered. Why had it risen now, and what did it truly want for, though it had defended them? Though it had crushed the fleet that dared to enter their skies, it had not spoken, no voice, no signal. Only the silent burning of its eyes and the heavy judgment of its gaze. Some said it was only waiting for humanity to call upon it to give it purpose. Others feared it rose for reasons no human could understand, and that one day it might turn its fury upon them, as easily as it had turned it upon their enemies. The alien empires argued among themselves. Some sought to unite their fleets to launch one last desperate strike, believing that numbers alone could overwhelm the Guardian. Others whispered of negotiation, of sending emissaries to Earth to beg for mercy, though they disguised such words as diplomacy. Yet beneath their fear lay pride, a pride too heavy to let them bow fully, for they had mocked humanity too long to admit defeat openly. And so their councils fell into chaos, while rebellions grew across their colonies, rebellions of humans who no longer trembled under alien chains, for every image of the Protector gave them strength, every whisper of its fury made them believe freedom was close and in their hearts. They no longer saw themselves as slaves, but as soldiers of a rising storm. In the shadow of these rebellions, the galaxy began to fracture, old alliances breaking apart, trust, unraveling, empires pointing fingers at one another, accusing, rivals of secret pacts with Earth, while none dared to send fleets openly into Sol again, and the Protector remained motionless, waiting as if it already knew the galaxy would destroy itself with fear before its hands ever needed to rise once more. And still in secret places, ancient scholars dug deeper into history, uncovering relics and scrolls long buried. And the more they found, the more their fear grew, for it became clear the Protector was no weapon built in desperation, but something older, something tied not just to Earth, but to the very balance of the galaxy itself. Stories emerged from forgotten archives of a time when humanity first reached for the stars, when threats beyond even the empires of today prowled the void. Vast shadows that consumed entire worlds, and in that age the Protector had been forged not as a tool, but as a guardian against extinction. And if those stories were true, then its awakening now could only mean one thing: something far worse than the empires themselves was stirring in the dark, and the Protector's silence was not hesitation, but preparation. Yet such truths were not spoken aloud, for the rulers feared panic. They silenced their scholars, locked away the records, and instead filled the air with speeches of power, with promises of new weapons, of fleets greater than before. But their people did not believe them, For the fear in their eyes was too clear, and across the stars, ordinary citizens began to whisper a dangerous thought. Perhaps it was not their empires that would save them, but the humans and their guardian, and if that belief spread unchecked, then the rulers themselves would crumble without a single shot being fired. On Earth, the leaders, too, debated fiercely. Some wanted to rally behind the guardian, to build fleets of their own, to march across the stars using its shadow as their shield. Others urged caution, afraid to place their trust in something they did not command. And between these voices, the people waited, watching the skies, knowing the protector had not moved since its last battle, yet feeling deep in their hearts that its stillness was not rest but warning. For one day, soon it would move again, and when it did, the galaxy itself would tremble. And so the stars lived in silence, caught between fear and hope, rebellions rising, fleets gathering, rulers arguing, and through it all the great being remained by the broken moon, unmoving yet unyielding, its burning eyes fixed upon the void, as though it alone could see what was coming, as though it alone knew the truth. And in that silence, the galaxy began to understand a shadow greater than any empire was spreading, and though no one yet knew where it would fall, they all knew it could not be stopped. The silence after the battle grew heavier than the clash of any fleet, and the galaxy carried that silence like a weight. Entire empires that once filled the stars with noise of trade and war now whispered in fear of the protector and its unmoving form near the broken moon. But silence did not mean peace. Rebellions across alien colonies spread like wildfire as enslaved humans rose with fire in their hearts and courage in their voices, inspired not only by the sight of their guardian, but by the fear in the eyes of their masters, for never before had the empires looked weak, never before had their voices trembled, and when humans saw that trembling, they knew chains could be broken faster than ever before. In hidden corners, ships that once carried minerals and slaves were seized by human hands, their crews cast down, their banners torn apart, and in their place rose the old symbol of Earth, a simple blue-white sphere painted on walls and carved into steel. And though the humans had little compared to the empires, their courage multiplied their strength. They fought with desperation and fury, and behind them always loomed the thought that the protector was watching, the protector was waiting, and in its silence it gave them hope, for if their guardian could burn fleets, then surely it could shield them in their struggle. The rulers of the galaxy watched this fire spread, and panic struck deeper than ever. Some called for unity to crush these rebellions before they grew beyond control, but others feared to move their fleets for to strike. Now was to risk drawing the protector's wrath, and so their indecision became paralysis. Their once mighty councils turned into rooms filled with shouting voices and no answers, while outside their walls their empires burned piece by piece from the inside. The Triarch Confederacy, however, did not shout. They watched with their ancient eyes calm and cold, for they remembered what the others had forgotten, and they whispered in their own halls that the protector's silence was not aimless. It was waiting for something, a signal, a moment, perhaps the rise of humanity itself. And if that moment came, then no empire, no council, no ruler would be left to command, for the galaxy itself would bow, whether it wished to or not. On Earth, the people felt the ripples of these uprisings, their news channels filled with images of humans on alien worlds, waving makeshift banners, their fists raised, their voices shouting for freedom. And every image sent fire through Earth's cities. Crowds filled the streets, their cheers rising into the night sky, and for the first time in living memory, the people no longer felt like a broken species. They felt like a rising storm leaders, spoke with pride, no longer begging for mercy, but promising the galaxy that humanity had never been destroyed, only forgotten, and now the forgotten were remembered in fire. But not all voices on Earth were filled with hope. Some feared the silence of their guardian more than its fury. What if it was not truly their protector? What if its rising served a greater purpose they did not understand? And what if one day it turned from shield to judge? And in their councils, these voices grew louder, for they could not control it. They could not command it. And though it had saved them once, they feared trusting in something that could not be bound. Yet their fear could not smother the fire burning across the world. Meanwhile, the protector remained, still its colossal frame motionless by the broken moon, its burning eyes fixed on the dark void, and sensors across the system continued to record strange pulses of energy rippling from it. Patterns no scientist could decode, some believed it was. Speaking in ways they could not hear, others feared it was calling to something beyond the stars, and in secret. A few wondered if its silence meant not waiting, but listening for an enemy that had not yet revealed itself. Rumors began to spread, whispers of shadows moving at the edge of the galaxy, fleets vanishing without explanation, not to humans, not to rebels, but to something else. Entire systems cut off without warning, their signals swallowed in silence, and when traitors carried these whispers to the empires, their fear deepened, for if something else was rising in the dark, then perhaps the protector had not awoken for the empires at all. Perhaps it had risen because the true storm was still coming. The galaxy stood at the edge of chaos, rebellions, burning fleets, frozen rulers paralyzed, and in the center of it all, Earth no longer forgotten, but rising once more shielded by a guardian whose silence spoke louder than any fleet. And though no one could predict what would come next, all felt the same truth pressing down upon them.